This is Writers Not Writing, the show where you can get to know your favorite writers and soon-to-be favorite writers by listening to them confess to the ways they procrastinate. Thanks for procrastinating with us. I'm Benjamin Gorman, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff. Doug tries his best to make me sound better. And each week we have a secret word to listen for. If you catch it, you earn the right to take an extra break at the time of your choosing from whatever is stressing you out. From Not a Pipe Publishing, welcome to Writers Not Writing.
Today's secret word is Sapir Whorf.
If I take my time.
Welcome, everyone. Today's guest is M.K. Martin. M.K. Martin is a motorcycle riding combat veteran turned linguistics nerd. When not working on her stories, Martin loves to read speculative fiction, drink tea, and vigorously defend the serial comma. She currently lives in southwestern Ireland, which is every bit as magical as you'd imagine. Welcome, Molly. I should ask first. Should I call you Molly or MK or Martin, or what should I call you throughout the show? Do you want to be Molly publicly?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I will answer to either Molly or Martin. I think I picked MK just as a pen name.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit of a shout out to Ursula K. Le Guin. So,
I see.
like, if I could just borrow that cool middle K initial thing that she's got going on.
Yes, I love her work. I got to meet her, got a signed copy of one of her books at one point for Noah.
Nice.
Yeah, she's very cool. She presented and read a bunch of, she was into German poetry at the time, translations of German poetry. She's just brilliant. I mean, yeah, yes, good person to shout out too. So as viewers of the show know, we always dress up in costume like this. We should explain our costumes to the folks who are on the podcast. So what did you choose to wear for a costume today?
So I am wearing the uniform of a dragoon in the English military, as I am paying homage to one of the famous women of Ireland who followed her husband into the army and concealed her identity and dressed as a man and fought in several wars and was wounded and eventually retired with a pension and the whole deal. So it's one of the things that I think is important to push back against the idea that women have not been involved in combat. My kiddo's very much a big fan of Lord of the Rings at this point, and so she loves the line from Eowyn where she says, those who don't have swords have long ago learned that we can still die on them. And it's very much the case that women have always been involved in combat, either as collateral damage or as support, and often as combatants themselves.
Yes, and so in honor of that, I am dressed as Elsie Inglis. I got this jaunty hat on with a feather, but then the actual costume itself is very much a British officer's dress uniform, or at least that's what it looks like to me, only in a women's cut. So, clearly there was a recognition that women were serving, which means for me it's quite tight in the waist. But I'm going for the part because Elsie Inglis was a surgeon and a supporter of the women's suffrage movement. And when World War I broke out, she offered her services to the Royal Army Medical Corps in 1914. But she was told to go home and sit still. And instead she went, no, I'm not going to do that. And she started the Scottish Women's Hospitals and treated troops in Serbia and Russia. And she was the first woman to be awarded the Order of the White Eagle, the highest honor given by Serbia. And she and her team eventually had to be, escaped out of there when the Russian Revolution hit in 1917. And this is the tragic part. When she got home to England, she died from cancer the day she got home.
Oh,
so she served in a combat situation as a surgeon to the end of her life, quite heroically. So in offer of Elsie Inglis, and you're dressed as Christian Davies, we've got women who served in combat today. Speaking of women serving in combat, we should tell the listeners, you served as well. You served in the army in Iraq and where else?
Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's I thank you for your service, of course, and that is very cool to have you dressed
It's
in to memorialize that today.
Yeah, I think for me it's kind of it's kind of a complicated situation because the older I get, sort of the less I agree with a lot of the US's military adventures. Um, but I also continue, like I said, I think it's very important that we don't um, hide or erase the contributions of all the multiple kinds of people who have always been involved in the military and we don't get a lot of credit for.
Yeah. Well, and I'm a public school teacher and I understand feeling conflicted about our institutions.
Well,
I
you're
work
basically
for
in the military yourself.
yeah, I am a government employee and I, serve the public in that way. And yet I know schools have often been an institution designed to maintain the status quo. At the expense of people who are struggling and are marginalized, and so I feel that conflicted sense of we can do individually good work within institutions that often do bad work, and that is hard thing to carry. So, and you served for how long?
I was in, oh gosh, all told, I think 8 years.
Yeah.
I was serving in the National Guard first, and then I switched over to the regular army. So I had two different um, kind of terms of service, and the National Guard was much more fun because we got to go to Hawaii instead of Afghanistan.
I mean, not knocking Afghanistan, but Hawaii is more fun. I think everyone can agree. Yeah, that it's a very different feel. So, what has been your favorite distraction this last week from your writing?
Oh, that's a good question. My favorite distraction. I think we have had a lot. Well, okay, I will say as a parent, one of my perennial favorite distractions is dealing with my kiddo, who is now out of school and back in camp. So that's good. I'm trying to pull up. I know I had written a bunch of
Yes, you had some
fairly
books
interesting
here
things.
that I
Yes,
did want
some
to talk
books.
about. Yes, yeah, I always
So
encourage everybody to have both screens up, and I'll chop this out. But yeah, if you've got both, none of my questions will surprise you.
yeah, let me just pull up my thing, which if I was smart, I would have had up.
Because I love the books you mentioned. I'm like, yes, I've read those within the last year myself and love them.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to start over again and I'll say, so
Excuse me, a little tough. Okay, yeah, so what is something on the show about procrastination? And we should mention you had a book come out yourself this last week, and so that is very exciting. And so, what has now been distracting you as you kind of get a little post-book break?
So one of the things that I love to do, of course, is reading, which I think every author has to do. And right now I'm in the middle of two series, Fonda Lee's Green Bone series and N.K. Jemison's Inheritance series. So I had read N.K. Jemison's, I can't remember the name of the series, but it starts out with fifth season,
Yes.
just amazing.
What is that whole trilogy called? It is brilliant. Yeah.
Oh, Broken Earth. That's the name of the
Yes.
series, the Broken Earth series. And so I'd gotten into for a long time, I have this problem when I read a really, really good book that I'm almost afraid to read another one by that author because I'm like, the high was so good.
Yeah.
I'm just afraid to read something else in case it's not as good, but it is as good. So you can rest assured
Yes.
they are both just as good. And for different reasons. One is much more of science fiction and the other is much more in the realm of fantasy.
And the voice is
But
different. Like I tell folks the Broken Earth one, you have to kind of power through the beginning because it is told
yeah,
in this second person. I mean, there is no such thing as second person. It is still told in this first person, but it is the protagonist is told to you, and
yes,
so it takes a while to get used to the fact that the character being described is not you. It's this woman who is going through. I mean, it's very clear right from the beginning that the you that is being spoken to is not you, the reader. But it takes a while to get used to that, and so I know folks who said I couldn't get through that. But once you get used to it, it's a marvelous series. Whereas the Inheritance books are told in a more traditional way, but yeah, they're so good.
I think too with the Broken Earth series, if you go into it knowing that there's some timeline wonkiness and you just know that going in, you'll be a little bit better prepared to read it.
Yeah, but yeah, that trilogy is a masterpiece. People will be reading that for 100 years. Like I love that series. And the Inheritance books are really wonderful as well. They are more comfortable, I think, for people.
Well, the problem that I had, and I'll tell you, some of your fans and my readers may know I had a writing residency where I went to Iceland for a month to do most of the work on book 3, which is almost done. And while I was there, silly me, I brought both book 1 of the Greenbone Jade City is book 1. So I brought Jade City, and I brought the 100,000 Kingdoms, which is book 1 of the Inheritance series. So I brought 2 book 1s,
but just book 1s
and no book 2s, because I was like, I'm going to be there for a month. I'm doing my own work. I will have very little time to read other people's books, and I don't know how much I'll like either of these, so I'll just bring book 1 of either. And I was so sad because I finished both of them within, a very short amount of time. And then I was like, well, now I'm here for a month, and it's not even worth it to try to get something over on the post.
Yeah, those were ones where I finished the first book and immediately bought the second.
Yes, so just do yourself a favor, get all 3 books from the get-go and just read them one after another, because otherwise you'll be very sad.
Yeah, that is excellent advice. Nobody should have one of those. You will not want to stop. They're so good. Well, I gave a shout out to Fonda Lee's Greenbone trilogy. Is it a trilogy? I'm trying to remember how many books are in that series.
It's a trilogy, and I believe there's either a short story or another novella that's like set in the world of.
And so I was talking about that with my guest last week, and thought, why not? And so I reached out to Fonda Lee, and Fonda Lee's going to be a guest on the show, probably not till January or February of next year. But folks, keep watching the show, because I will have Fonda Lee on. But yeah, that
pulling in the big names.
Yeah, well, that series is so fantastic. I think she is doing some really, really, I think it would have been kind of superficial to just say, oh, okay, I'm going to take fantasy and I'm going to do this fantasy thing, but with, kung fu and jade magic. Like, she goes so far beyond that into this really evolved, complex world. I tell folks it's kind of Kung Fu movie meets The Godfather meets I do not describe it well.
I was describing it as The Sopranos, but like with Kung Fu.
With Kung Fu and magic.
And magic.
So good. I and remarkably well written. Like, there are these passages where I would just be crying. Some character would die and I'd be going, no, I hated them and then came to love them and now they're dead. Like, yeah, she's which is very kind of Sopranos-esque or whatever, where she'll take a character and they are flawed. The people are not universally, the good guy, the bad guy, but then you just love them so deeply, and then people die because it's a crime family. So yeah, it is totally. People should check those out.
I will say there were some characters that when the character, and it was very clear to me at the time the characters, I'll say characters, had died, and I was flipping through the rest of the book because I'm like, there's no way no way that this character. Nope, she killed that character off completely.
Yeah, there were those, we talk about killing your darlings, and it's often, killing that phrase that you love so much, but it doesn't fit, or that paragraph. But sometimes killing your darlings is a person. Sometimes it is a character, and to be able to pull it off and not, to resist the temptation to go, I'll magically bring this character back. Like, no, they need to go for the sake of the plot. And she had a lot of guts to say, this character's gonna die. I don't want to spoil too much, but even in the very first book, you're like, no way this character can die. Yeah, no, they're really dead. Oh yeah, so good. So what about news? What in the world of the news has been pulling you away from your writing?
So I think I had thought about it and I said, not to be too bleak, but the sort of fascist takeover of much of the US is, and being here in Ireland, I think sometimes we don't see the day-to-day news, so we kind of just see I'll say highlights, but I don't know if I really mean highlights. So we only see kind of, when the Supreme Court goes out of session and they're just like, let's just drop this clinker and take off. And which I did. I was very interested to notice, for example, their decision on affirmative action where they said Ivy League schools can't use affirmative action to make sure that they have diverse enrollments, but the military academies can. And that, again, as a person with a military background, I'm like, oh, it's very telling to me of where you think that, Black and brown Americans should be and where you don't think that they should be.
Yep. I mean, that was one of those, you're telling on yourselves. You are really revealing, what you think is important. Yeah, that was striking. And the fact that they didn't go after legacies, so
exactly.
Totally fine to have affirmative action for rich white people. But yeah, that's
otherwise known as, all of American history.
Yeah,
basically
exactly.
Affirmative action for rich white people.
Yep. And so, yeah, that case was, not surprising and at the same time disappointing. Like,
it is.
We saw this is where you were going to go. So yeah, but then the one that was, I think, even more egregious was the one about the ability for private businesses that serve the public to decide based on religious grounds that they didn't have to serve LGBTQIA plus folks. And that was just,
and the person, I believe the person who filed the lawsuit hadn't even been materially harmed in any way and was totally just theoretically like, I want a free pass ahead of time for my bigotry.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh.
Catholic dispensation. Like, I want to be able to commit this sin in the future. Yeah. That was very frustrating to watch. The dissents were wonderful, though. Sotomayor wrote the dissent in that one, and it is just this powerful dissent where she says this is enshrining a caste system. This is not something we would allow in any other setting for people who are committed to serve the public to then discriminate against a protected class, and you have done that. And then one of the things that's traditional is the court always says, respectfully, I dissent at the end. And she didn't include the word respectfully. And it was like, no, I'm going out of my way to break this tradition. This is not worthy of respect. And so I was like, good for you, Sotomayor. But, those dissents are just historical documents to kind of say there were people who opposed this. But the law is now in favor of, transphobia and homophobia. And so that is, yeah, it's a scary time. On the other hand, I do wonder about your perspective when you are seeing it in these flashes, and it's often the worst. Does it how do you feel watching are you reading The Guardian? I mean, what are you, I know you're on Twitter as well, which is a horrible way to perceive anything.
No, you don't get you don't get any legitimate news from Twitter anymore. So I think we all know that.
You would find out, like, when Michael Brown was killed in St. Louis, Twitter was this source of news, where you were getting what is actually happening on the ground before news sources even knew or fully understood it. And the journalists have left. The on the ground reporting has
just
gone
en masse.
Yeah.
I think so. One of the really interesting experiences that we have had since being here is sort of trying to explain America to the Irish. And a lot of times they're sort of almost embarrassed to ask questions. They'll come up and just kind of with a little laugh and haha. So is it true that you can go into a store where you buy groceries and clothes and you can buy a gun there? We're like, oh yeah, you definitely can. Just show up and buy a gun. Yep. And I was actually at a grocery store one day, and these two lads, they were stocking the shelves, and they had a big, like a bunch of boxes in between me and them, so they didn't see that I was there. And they were just playing like they were just talking to each other, and the one of them says, "Hello, I'm an American and I would like to buy a gun." And the other one says, "Well, do you have an ID?" And he says, "No, but I'd really like a gun." And then the first one says, "Well, good enough, here you go."
I
And
mean,
I was like, this is their sort of like portrayal, this is their understanding of Americans. And I'm like, but it's not wrong.
it's yeah. Unfortunately, I was going to say that's true. I literally was at a gun show one time, and the guy was like, "If we step out into the parking lot, then I can make you another deal." Like,
Yeah, you can buy trunk guns, no problem.
yeah. I mean, the system is so fundamentally broken that it's all favors how do we make sure you get a gun?
And I will say, so there's another American family. The school that my kiddo goes to here is a pretty diverse school. It's not a parish school. So there tend to be a lot of people from the rest of Europe who are not necessarily, excited about sending their child to a Catholic school. And there's another American family there. And at the end of school year, they were doing like a costume party. Or no, it was before the Halloween break. So they were doing a costume party, and all the parents were standing around outside, waiting for the kids to come out. And, just talking and talking and talking. All of a sudden, we hear this just chorus of screams and yells and just chaos erupting from the school. And myself and the other American parents were flipping out. Like you could just see our eyes were widening. We're about to start running up to the school. And none of the Irish parents even moved, because it didn't even occur to them that their children would be in danger in school.
Yeah. Yeah. And what did it turn out to be?
They were doing a parade of costumes. So as the first teacher, the principal came out and she was dressed in her costume, and everybody started cheering and screaming for her. And that's what we were hearing. And that's what it was. And it's so innocent and
yeah. I mean, and that's
wholesome.
It's hard for us to go, that's a policy choice. This is a choice a society has made, that when there is loud screams, they are of joy, or when there are loud screams, you should run and you should check on the safety of your child. This is a choice we have made. And we have decided to be a place where schools are, the United States, where schools are potentially deadly, scary places. And I think that's a hard thing to, like, when we come to that realization, this is not aberrant. This is not, oh, if one lone wolf does this thing. Like, this is a system. This is a choice we've made. And that is hard for me to square when I hear about one of these shootings, and I'm so afraid for my own school and my own students. And then I'm saying, I can't dismiss this as this is this one person. Like, the people in my community, every time they take a vote, are deciding on that, and they are deciding that's okay. And they're deciding that's okay for me and for my students. And that's, it makes it hard to be motivated to go back into a school building every day, knowing this community has decided that this is okay for all of our schools. It's rough. I would love to be in a place where the screaming is of joy. That's where, and that's a choice we could make. That's what's so frustrating. Yeah.
Well, I'm continually sorry that you and every other teacher and every school child in the US has to deal with it constantly. I was thinking about sort of my generation, the older, what would we be, Generation X or older millennials, that we're sort of the last generation that didn't grow up with the idea of school shootings as a routine part of our experience.
Yeah, well, we're about the same age. Columbine, I think I was in college. And that was, very, very scary. But the first time it's this isolated event, right? And you're going, oh, that's this horrific tragedy. Now we're at, I don't even want to know how many over the course of this year. And this is a system. This is the way it works. So yeah, it is scary. And it does change our valence. And it also changes the way the kids are looking at it. This is normal. This is their experience. What, you do these drills because this happens.
Well, this is part of the big reason why we moved to Ireland. Is my kiddo having to go through in their school, having to go through, and they were, I don't know, 4 or 5, just very, very tiny child, coming back and saying, Mom, why would somebody come to my school and try to kill me?
Mm-hmm. That's a valid question.
It is a very good question.
Here in Oregon, the way our legal system is set up, somebody could walk into our school building with an loaded AR-15, and until they level it and point it at someone, they have not broken any laws. And the only thing that the school resource officer could do is come out and say, we would like you to leave. And then when the person says, I refuse to leave, then they could get a charge of trespassing. But it is
that'll definitely stop somebody,
right? Yeah, I mean, we've designed the system so that you're not breaking the law until you basically pull the trigger, and because all the rights favor the person holding the gun, not the students, and that's that conversation about kind of rights and freedoms that we're unwilling to have. The freedom of the person holding the gun is absolute, and when you talk to the Second Amendment folks, they're going, there can be no infringement. And I'm saying, okay, but we infringe on, for example, the free speech rights to say, but you can't yell fire in a theater. Can there be some limits for the sake of the safety of others? Nope.
Well, and also the amendment itself says well-regulated militia. And I've got news for people. Some sad person living in their, hovelly basement watching Andrew Tate videos 24/7 is not a part of a well-regulated anything.
Well, and that's the thing, is it is the only time in the Constitution that it says something will be well regulated. Like this, and so the folks who are saying there can be no regulation, if you're going to say because of the Constitution, what does well regulated mean? Well regulated is essential to that amendment. So can we honestly say this is well regulated?
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah.
I feel like we've gotten onto the hobby horse section.
Yes, but I mean, this is, but I think I am curious about when you're seeing it now, living in Ireland and you're seeing through the news, it has got to be really challenging to go, if it bleeds, it leads. And so those stories that are the most egregious are, there are no news stories that say, and then today in Independence, Oregon, nothing really happened. And so, does it skew your view of it? Does it look a lot more grim than it actually is? Or,
it probably does. Again, just because we kind of only get the headlights and the highlights, and when something filters up to the point where the Irish will actually notice what's going on in the US, and most of the time it's they're fascinated by big tornadoes because there's no tornadoes here,
right?
And wildfires and things like that, because this country is basically a sponge. It has never been dry. And so trying to
that's true.
That's true. Like, what do you mean a wildfire? Oh, what now? Like the grass would burn.
That's true. The peat bogs don't really burn. They
No, not so much. I mean, you can dig them up and dry them out, and then you can burn them, but it takes a bit of work to set anything on fire in Ireland.
That's right. Yes, it's hard work to make a fire in Ireland. It's thousands of years of people working very hard to create fire in Ireland. Oh, I do love it there, though. It is so beautiful. And you're in County.
I'm in Kerry. So it's the very southwest corner.
Yeah, and it's beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's just, we went out one day and we saw 4 rainbows in the day, and one of them was a double rainbow, and we're just like, this is ridiculous. And I feel like this is a bit much Ireland, and you could probably just scale it back slightly.
Yeah, tone it down, Ireland. You don't have to sell us. We already live here. That sounds fantastic. So what about hobbies? What has been a hobby that's been pulling you away from your writing lately?
Well, okay, since we were already talking about how gorgeous it is where I live, I'll say long walks on the beach, because I live 5 minutes away from the Irish Atlantic Ocean. I can literally go out of my door and be on one of the most beautiful, so they call, a long strip of sand is called a strand. So we've got a strand that we can walk along. And there's a part of the strand further off in one direction that's one of the blue flag beaches where there's a lot of surfers and things like that. But our part of the strand, there's nobody there. And so we just can walk along the strand and look across to the mountains that are over on the peninsula across from us, and there's clouds going across them. And I basically like I live in Middle Earth, so
Yes. Yeah, it would lend itself to writing fantasy, which is not what you write.
well, and I mentioned my kiddo is very into Lord of the Rings at this point, and we had found out that J.R.R. Tolkien had spent a good amount of time in Ireland before and during writing The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion and all of that. And so we're like, yeah, you can really tell. First of all, every time they stop, they need to have tea. So, like, obviously they're Irish.
Right.
Breakfast is a really, like, that's a non-negotiable. You will have breakfast and it will be enormous. So just make peace with that.
Yes, yes, that was I am not a big breakfast eater, and I was like, oh, that is culturally not fitting here. Everybody's having, marvelous breakfast. A simple breakfast is bigger than I am eating normally.
Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, that's
Yeah, and I think
so
the
the
other thing that I do like to do, which kind of doesn't quite fit in the vibe here, is I like to go to cafes and write, because that's always, if I'm at home, I get very distracted.
Mhm.
There's always housework to do, there's chores to do, and there's also video games that desperately need to be played. So if I leave, then I can get some work done. So I'll go to a cafe, and a lot of folks, if they go to a cafe, they'll sit for several hours, but it's usually with somebody else, and it's usually because they're talking. Like, socializing is a really big and important part of how people conduct their lives. So having one person sitting in a cafe by themselves, a bit strange.
Yeah, people are like, that's weird. You've come to a public place and you are not,
And you're alone. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's
I like sort of the strangeness of being a stranger here, because anything that I do that's weird, they're like, "Oh, it's because she's an American."
right,
They
right.
don't realize it's just because I'm actually strange.
Well, and a writer is strange. Like, yes, okay, we are also these people who craft, 120,000 word stories. We're weird. So you
Mm.
can go, yeah, an American writer. That is kind of odd.
When you're sitting there crying as you writing the death of that beloved character, sobbing into your latte in the cafe, and they're like, "Okay."
Yeah. Yep, I'm crying over a made up person. This is what we do. Like, yep, absolutely. So also you like riding your motorcycle. How
I
is that
do.
in Ireland?
Um, so the weather is fairly mild all year round. You cannot convince the Irish of that, because they'll tell you, "Oh, it gets very cold in winter, it gets down to like 40 degrees, just frigid." Um, I think it does get much colder, or cold enough to snow up north, but where we are, we've had like a very ill-tempered frost at one point, and that was about the
Yeah.
extent of it. So you could pretty much ride all year round, except for the rain. So you do absolutely have to get yourself some good rain leathers. And then most of the time, we've come up with the word mizzling, which is a combination of mist and drizzling. So
Yep.
it's mizzling. So if it's
I'm going to steal
mizzling,
that
you
because we have
can,
that in Oregon. Yep, we get
yeah.
mizzling.
Well, that's the thing, is I had lived in Oregon for quite a while, and I feel like it really prepared me for moving to Ireland. And we get asked, they're like, "Aren't you worried about the rain when you moved here?" I was like, "No."
Yep, that's par for the course. Yeah, there are parts of Oregon where I'll drive through and I'll go, this looks so much like, being in Ireland. Like that,
Mm-hmm.
when everything is green, pre-August, it's
Yeah.
very, very much like Ireland. And then it all dies in August, and then it's all back. But yes, we have some Irish scenery at places, and we also have that constant spitting,
Mm-hmm.
mizzling. Mizzling is so much nicer than spitting. Spitting sounds unsanitary, but yes, the constant the constant mist drizzle. But as far as folks on the road, are you driving your motorcycle the same one that you had out here?
Yeah.
That's a
We
bigger bike
we
than folks in Ireland are used to, right?
it is. It's not the only one though, but most of the bikes here tend to be smaller. Mine is a bit on the big side. Um, but I I'm glad that I brought it. I had gone through this thing right before we moved. We were talking to our neighbors about what we were bringing with us and what we were getting rid of, and we were going to get rid of the car because it's far too expensive to bring a car over and then have it retrofitted to have the steering wheel on the other side and all of that. And I said, yeah, and I have to get rid of the motorcycle too. They drive on the left, they drive on the other side of the road from Americans. And my neighbor looked at me and she said, it's a motorcycle.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, because in my head, I was like, no, I can't bring an American motorcycle to Ireland. They drive on the other side of the.
Yep.
Yeah.
Still works.
And not one of my best moments.
But folks are cool. I mean, do you get a lot of looks when you're in traffic?
No, not a ton. So the motorcycle culture, kind of as with most things in Ireland, and I don't want to downplay the seriousness of a lot of the issues that Irish people are grappling with. But as with a lot of things that I've found in Ireland, it's just there's really like a kindness and a friendliness to a lot of things. So the motorcycle community, by and large, they'll wave to each other. It's sort of the same thing as in the US. But the problem is in the US, because you're riding on the right and the other rider is riding on the right as well. If you see another rider, you can do like the little 2-finger salute.
Yeah.
But you can't do that in Ireland because you're on the opposite sides of the road. So you can't take your hand off the throttle to wave to them with the other hand. So now we just have to, very decorously nod to each other instead of waving.
Interesting. I would not have thought of that, but where the throttle is. Yeah, that you don't switch the throttle on your bike when you switch sides of the road like you can do with the steering wheel. Yeah, that's so the point of the show is to help readers get to know, their next favorite writer. And so if one of the things I was thinking about is, if folks out there have ever played Dungeons and Dragons, you choose your character, and who you choose as a character can be very, very different from you. But Molly, yourself, if you were a D&D character, what would be your race and class?
I mean, I feel like elf or half elf is always my go-to. I've played a lot of D&D, and I love the racial in the D&D system. There's always racial bonuses that come with the different races, and the ones that I tend to lean towards are either the elf or the half elf ones. And it's always so fun to be able to say to your dungeon master when they're describing a dark room that I have low light vision.
Yeah, I can see in here.
I can see in here. Just just watch them deflate a little bit as they're like,
shoot. And what would be your job?
I mean, this one is really just me playing myself, as I would be a bard. I love the bard class. I feel like it's such a fun class to play. And there's a lot of different ways that you can go with it. And also, my personality is sort of the jack of all trades, master of none kind of situation. And I feel like the bard is really great with that, as they're not really good at anything in particular, but they're kind of okay at a lot of different things.
Yeah, the balanced skills of a half elf bard. I mean, it's a lot of balanced skills. Yes, I can see that, absolutely. So okay, now you've been ambushed. 3 level 1, these are just level 1 goblins, attack you in the woods. You're a half elf bard. What do you do?
Well, so obviously first thing you do is roll initiative. As every player knows, roll initiative, curse at your dice, and then, being a bard, I would talk my way out of the situation. I would recruit the goblins, and I would send them to surrounding communities to hype me up before I arrived.
There you go, hype elves or hype goblins. I love it.
Hype
goblins. Yes.
Everybody needs a pack of hype goblins.
Which, as writers, we're like, oh, we talk all about, you need to have this team of folks who's going onto social media and who's telling people about your books. Hype goblins is a really good term. I
think if instead of calling it my street team, if we called people our hype goblins.
Yes. They might be more inclined. I would like to be someone's hype goblin. Yeah.
See?
Wow. I may have just come up with a new title as a publisher. I'm your hype goblin. That's great. Okay, we're going to go to our ad break, but when we come back, I'm going to ask you about what you've been daydreaming about lately. Today's show is brought to you by Nancy Ballard's Under Caraco's Moon series. The planet Caraco is short on technology and long on wide open spaces. When Seth Riley returns home to Underrim, it isn't the peaceful village he remembers. Trouble is in the wind, and the new girl in town is at the heart of it. The two of them get in the way of Jerdix, a racketeer with a torture device outlawed throughout the Interstellar Coalition. Unable to cope with what he's suffered, Seth flees to a lonely camp where he becomes obsessed with taming a horse as damaged as he is. She follows, determined to help him. But immersing herself in his troubles and in the challenges of rugged terrain and solitude just helps her deny her own ordeal. Isolation is not a cure, and Jerdix is still out there. Can they stand up to this threat and find the help they both need to heal? The series continues in deep canyons and tricky ground as Seth and Lee discover something that will change the fate of their whole planet. Karen Eisenbray, author of the Rage Brigade duology and the Wizard Girl trilogy, says, "This thrilling sci-fi western rides the open range of another world with complex characters caught in a web of conspiracy." And Miko Azul, author of the Demons of Morelia series, says, "Distant Trails is a roller coaster ride of pain and despair, love and redemption. Ballard's characters embody both frailty and resilience as they redefine their lives from tragedy to hope." Get your copies of the whole Under Caraco's Moons series today. Welcome back, everybody. So, Molly, what have you been daydreaming about lately?
I would say languages. So I have a degree in linguistics, and I freaking love languages. I recently took a very short holiday to Bruges because my spouse and I had seen the movie In Bruges a long time ago, and it's gorgeous and a fairy tale town. And I won't say exactly how it was referred to, a fairy tale effing town, but
Yes.
put the accent in there, put the emphasis in there as you like. But it really is, and it's beautiful. But while I was there, my reading material of choice, and I don't know if you're going to have to bleep this out because it's the title of the book, but the title of the book is Word Slut. And it's about a feminist reclaiming of the English language, sort of looking at.
Great. I'm writing that down.
It's so good.
Yeah, so what are some of the
talking
points
about
that makes?
What's that?
What are some of the ways that helped you look at English differently?
So looking at sort of how did English get to be the way that it is, and why do languages do the things that they do? So I think a lot of times when people think of linguistics, they think you're just a polyglot, which is somebody who knows a lot of different languages, which is probably true of most linguists, but doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And what's more the case is that you're really just interested with how language works theoretically overall, not necessarily this specific language. So you're comparing different languages and seeing why do languages do what they do in this way. And one of the things that I thought was so interesting in the book is they had talked about how language changes over time. And a lot of times when we see language change, it's young women who are leading the language change, who are experimenting with language, and they're pushing it forward. And what they're saying now, our kids will be saying as, just a normal part of their speech. But if you are sort of a conservator of language and you want to know where language has come from, you'll talk to what's called the norms, which is I can't remember. It's the something rural men. I think it's and I forget what the O stands for, but they're called the norms. So we'll edit this out. I'll definitely have thought about it. So anyways, so you can look at the norms, and they tend to conserve language. And one of the reasons that this tends to happen is because a lot of times, in the old times when you had sort of more of an apprenticeship system, what would happen is, the son would inherit his apprenticeship from his father. Dad was a blacksmith. I will be a blacksmith. My son will be a blacksmith. My grandson will be a blacksmith. And so you're only working with the vocabulary of that trade with people who are interested in that trade, and with people of that class level, whereas women who are working outside of the home, who are going, maybe going as a servant to somebody else's home, or they're going to the markets or things like that, like their ticket to social mobility is being able to code switch and move up and down in different, registers of language. So women tend to be more experimenting with language. And the other thing that they brought up is how marginalized groups tend to use language in really creative ways. Like in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, there was Polari, which is sort of a gay dialect that was used primarily in the UK. And it was a way for, LGBT, mostly gay men, to speak to each other in public in a way that would keep their identities safe. And sort of as that became less, not to say that it isn't still, dangerous and fraught, but it's less so. And so the need to have a coded secret language has sort of fallen out. But there's these really interesting things about how language, how minorities and oppressed peoples use language as a way to take power back from the other people.
Well, and it was really fascinating. I really want to check this out because the ways that I've read that a lot. I'm really into linguistics as well. I love learning about the origin of especially new phrases, new words. And you're right, they often come from marginalized people because they have to. Like, this group of people has to create new language. They can't just go with what has been passed down. And a lot of the times, new phrases and new language that have come to us, if you go back 400 or 500 years, come from two sources. They come from prisons and they come from the Navy. And the reason is because those were some of the only places where people would leave a community and then come back to that community.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have phrases that would be, from this small town, and they would be kind of fixed in this small town. But if somebody went to jail and needed to use that in a creative way within prison, then it might spread to other communities. And so that's how phrases could kind of break out. And it's interesting for me to think about how a phrase that would have been created by another disempowered group, namely women in a particular community, could become popular enough to then be, taught to somebody who then goes into the Navy, the Army, has to travel, but who will be returning and become a norm. And then, and so you could see these marginalized groups transferring language to other places through those kind of mechanisms. So I'm really excited to see how, because the story that I was told, it didn't refer to women at all. It was, men who go to jail end up using this phrase, and then men come back and teach it to men who aren't moving around. And then but it totally excised women's creative role in the construction of language. It makes total sense that women would have the most, I don't know about flexibility in terms of moving among the power dynamic, because they would have been limited in so many ways in terms of what roles they could have, but they would have been exposed, right? They would have been able to go from the downstairs to the upstairs in the house, and
yep.
And it's a word slut. I will absolutely check that out.
It's such a good book.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, since my kiddo is enrolled in a school here, and part of the mandatory education process in Ireland is for all children to learn Irish. So my kiddo is learning some Irish, and it's really interesting being here because there's so many parallels with the Irish and their history with the British and the indigenous peoples of the US and their history with the various colonizers that were there, not only the British, but, chiefly the British for a long time. And then the Americans after that, the white colonial settler Americans.
Because Irish is not etymologically connected to English, right? Or maybe
it's not, no.
Loosely, is it even loosely Germanic at all?
Or is it totally very, very distantly, because it originally came by way. So the ancient story of how Ireland got to be settled is that there was an old race of people that was here, and then there was a group of people who came over from Spain, and they had a big battle, and eventually they decided that the Duatha would go under the earth and they would live in the other world, and the people who had arrived from Spain would live in Ireland and on sort of on top of the ground, and the other ones would live under the ground. And that's a gross oversimplification.
But I mean,
feel free to send me all the
a
hate mail you like,
conquest,
Irish people.
it's a conquest myth, right? These are
yeah, it's a conquest myth. But that's sort of the roots of the Irish language came with what's believed to be those, the people originally coming over from Spain. And so then there's a lot of influence as well from places like Scotland, from the Gaelic in Scotland. And Irish is very close to what's spoken in Scotland, but obviously not the same, as we're constantly reminded.
But that Iberian language of those people from Spain would have been pre-Latin, right? So that's not related to any kind of Latin root that
but it's still Irish. Part of the Proto-Indo-European family. So it's still, there's a lot of things that are similar, but one of the things that I really find fascinating about Irish is, of the languages that I know, it's the first language that has a different word order.
Yes, so English I was wondering about that syntax.
Yeah, English has very flexible word order, and in Irish the verb comes first. And the really cool thing about being here, sort of learning listening to the Hiberno English, is to listen to how sort of that structure of Irish, knowing that the verb comes first in Irish, and then listening to how they use English, because a lot of times they'll put the verb first, even in English. So it'll be like, have a cup of tea, will I? So it's that verb first, and you're like, oh, it's so fun to know where that structure came from.
I wonder if you will get to the point where, and you may already be there, where you read an author and you can go, this author is Irish, because I know that they also have this impulse towards the syntax that is Irish. I'll come across that when I'm reading authors whose native language is Spanish, and the syntax is just different enough that and similar enough to French. It might not be Spanish necessarily, but like
like one of the Romance languages.
To go, oh, I'm going to, in English, we have so much flexibility. And so what we choose to do reveals something about us, and you can say the blue house or the house which is blue, and they both work. And when I hear somebody who is saying, the house which is blue or the house that is blue, I'm going, oh, okay, this is because the person wants to think Casa Azul. Like they want to put the syntax in what is comfortable for them.
Yeah, that the noun comes first in their mind, and then they have to bring in the modifier kind of after the fact.
Yeah.
Or what would be to an English speaker's mind after the fact.
Right. My impulse as a English speaker first would be blue house, right? But so verb first, which I wonder if there's, I'm sure there's been some, it's Ireland. There's amazing scholarly research on everything related to Ireland and Ireland. You've got thousands of years of people studying, in these amazing universities. But I'll bet you there's been some really great research done on the impact of verb first thinking, right? Because it would change the way you'd think about how we interact with one another. Like it is hiding the verb. Passively, that seems very Midwestern to me. Midwestern United States. Like, I don't want to offend you, so I'm going to share as much information before to a call to action.
And I think the other thing is that English tends to be very sort of just by the nature of the way that we use nouns and pronouns, it tends to be very focused on the actor rather than the action. So it tends to be almost I don't want to use the word aggressive. That's too strong of a word for what I'm thinking of. But it's very much focused on like you are a doer.
Yeah.
Rather than like an action happens. It's not passive. There's not a passive construction the way that there is in English. The sort of like mistakes were made by zombies.
Yeah.
But it's that mistakes zombies made. Or made mistakes zombies, kind of would be the
made mistakes zombies.
Made mistakes zombies.
Oh,
that does sound like a chapter in my book, though.
Yeah, I was going to say. So what else was it like in Bruges? That's the, how did this, what was the language? Because I don't even know. The language there is unique, right?
So Bruges is in Belgium, which has, to my knowledge, 3 official languages. And again, I apologize to any Europeans that I'm offending and getting this incorrectly, but I believe that they are French, Flemish, and German. And to my understanding, Bruges is in the primarily Flemish part of Belgium. So, I had no prayer of understanding what was going on.
Yeah.
But most, it is true that most Europeans speak some English. Sometimes they will do so less willingly than others, but generally, if you're nice and, they'll try to help out. And then the other thing is, I had been studying a little bit of French, so if it was absolutely necessary, I could say the 3 or 4 things that I knew in French and sort of muddle through. But no, it was really gorgeous. I think I keep going back to that. It just stunning canals, beautiful architecture. It's the perfect place to go if you are an older person who just wants a quiet vacation and you're not going to go on a million activities and you're just going to relax.
And it's very much a walk the city and just look around, right?
Yeah.
See,
like
that's
we
style.
didn't get a car or anything. We just got in a hotel and just walked everywhere, and it was you could get to everywhere you wanted, and there are some buses and trains, and it was easy enough. We flew into Brussels and then we took the train to Bruges, and the station for the train is in the bottom floor of the airport, so you don't even have to go anywhere. You just go down to the bottom floor and away you go.
Yeah, I love those. My idea of the way to see a city is just to walk it, like just walk around and absorb, But I would love to hear the Flemish. Like that is something that I don't know, and that would be interesting to just to have all around me. That other language group that I'm not used to. I'm this next year I'm going to get to go to Southeast Asia for the first time, and I'm really excited about walking around Bangkok and just hearing how does one of the things that it has taken me far too long to learn. I could have picked this up in a book or something and never did, is that not only is the syntax different in languages, but even the pacing is a cultural construction. And
the prosody is different.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite like nonsense pieces of trivia that I collected while I was studying linguistics is that babies cry in the prosody of their parents' native language.
Really?
And so you can take a newborn baby, and they had recordings of a French baby and a German baby, and they just played the sound of their cries, and you could hear the difference between this is the way that French babies cry and this is the way that German babies cry, because of where the stress falls in the language and sort of the rhythm of the language.
Oh, that is fascinating.
English is harder because English doesn't tend to. English is our stresses are just willy-nilly all over the place. We don't really tend to worry about those pesky things like rules in our language. We're just anywhere we go, we're like, okay, we're just gonna absorb pieces of this language and borrow this and take that. And
and even rules, like we will steal the structure of multiple languages. I tell my students, they're like, why is this way or that way? And I'm like, English is just mean.
I know.
The second language learners.
My poor kiddo, when they're trying to learn spelling and, they're like, why is this spelled this way? I'm like, because English is stupid.
Yeah, it's just cruel. Like, why should you have to learn though and through and cough? Because English is mean. It's just cruel, But that's but I at the same time, English is wonderful for writers. It provides us with this incredible flexibility, but it's very hard flexible, for learners.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think just with if you understand language in the idea of a tool, is with any tool, is the more you know about that language, the more you can understand, like, this is what it's really good for, and this is what I have to work around. And English is really helpful with that. When I was in Iceland, some of the other artists that were staying at the residency where I was at were from Estonia. And so, most of the time they would speak English to me, but then they would speak Estonian to each other, obviously. And so that was really interesting. And one of them spoke Spanish. So she and I would speak Spanish to each other, and then we would speak English all together as a group, and then they would speak Estonian by themselves. So there was, this big mishmash of languages going on. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting is in Estonian, there's no gendered third person. So there's no he, she. It's essentially all of the pronouns are they pronoun, where it's not a gendered
It's
in the way
person
that you,
does this thing.
yeah, in the way
Yeah.
that you or I isn't a gendered pronoun.
Yeah.
Third person isn't gendered as well. So they would talk about something, and sometimes they would say he, and sometimes they would say she. And so,
Yeah.
as a person who speaks English as their native language, and especially during our cultural moment when
Mhm.
people are so, there's a lot of discussion about which pronouns and how do we use them, and how do we be respectful of other people and their identities and things like that. So having them sort of, 1 minute this is a he and 1 minute this is a she, I'm like, it doesn't matter. You're just
Yeah.
talking about another person, and it doesn't matter.
Well, and I do think that is one of, I mean, I remember reading about, I think it was in Sweden, they they still have a formalized enough language and structure that the king could just say, next year the government will use this non-gendered pronoun in all of our public
Mm-hmm.
documents, and then that becomes, the ability to enforce language in that way can lead to regularity that we could never have in English and American English,
Yeah.
certainly. But
There's a lot of that happens in places like Iceland, because that's a place that I mean they're famous for the fact that they've retained so much of their linguistic history that they can still read ancient texts, and yet their language is robust and functioning. And so they have this organization that sort of Icelandicizes things when they come into Icelandic. And
and
so,
actively
what do we
prevents, like,
call a
you cannot
computer,
name
and what
your
do we call
child.
the internet? And
Yeah, I know in Iceland you cannot name your child something that's not on the approved list. Like, it's pretty,
mm,
you have to that preservation, it requires an activity. Like, you have to actually say, no, you can't be outside the rules, because we know if we let people start naming their kids anything, pretty soon the Icelandic names will fall away. And so,
yeah.
nope, these are the
Well,
approved names.
so the big trend in sort of the gender equality front of this particular thing is it used to be, you'd be Eric's son, and
An
you
anecdote.
know even all the women would be Eric's son, even though
Yeah,
they're clearly not Eric's son. And now they can also be, the, let's say, Alba's daughter.
yeah,
So they would take, the mother's name and the daughter.
yeah.
And
Thor's daughter. You find a lot of, yeah.
mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
still, the list of names is short, and then son, daughter. It's like, so you're
Yep.
preserving, and I love that there's a recognition that it does have to be flexible. It does have to change, but it's going to change communally. We are going to agree that it
We're going to
changes in
talk
this.
about this, and
Yeah.
we're going to be thoughtful, and we're
And
not just going to.
whereas, we have a remarkably democratic system. Whatever takes off and people understand is correct. Like, I have to tell students, why is it this word works? Because 51% of the population decided it worked. And not even that, it's very, very loose. But the downside is it is a mishmash to learn. It is a language created by a mob. It's
Yes.
crazy. So yeah, but it is fun. Like, I never get tired of learning new things about the English language, because it's so rich and bizarre, and it's wonderful for writers. But gosh, it's cruel to learners. It's
Oh,
just
yes.
so fun. So you also have an interest beyond linguistics in virology, which I want readers to know about because of the books. So
Yes.
tell everybody about how you got interested in that.
So I think I was always interested in diseases. My grandfather was a doctor, and my sort of first attempt at college, I was pre-med for a while, and I was going to go into virology, um and apparently universities want money for this kind of thing. So I joined the army instead, because not only would they not require money to join the army, they would pay me.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Which sounded really good. And then they would also give me clothes and food and a place to live. And it's a socialist organization.
Yeah, it totally is. Yes, this is socialism, folks.
It's socialism. Yeah. So I joined the army instead, but I continued being really interested in diseases. I loved reading One of the books that I read was Virus Hunters of the CDC. I was reading the one that was called Level 4. I've read things like The Demon in the Freezer, which is about the Ebola outbreak in Reston, Virginia. Yes, there was an Ebola outbreak in Reston, Virginia.
I
People don't know
remember.
about it because
Yeah,
let's just not talk about that.
Yep. Yeah, I learned about it after the fact.
Yeah. So all of that informed my writing. And so I had written Survivors Club, obviously before COVID was, anything. And then it got published, and then COVID happened, and I don't know. I'm still wondering how that will affect my long-term book sales.
Right.
On the one hand, I think people are reading it and I think they're okay with it now, but there was a time period where people are like, I don't want to read anything about viruses. I don't even want to hear about them. And for somebody who had written 3 books that are based around a viral apocalypse, that's not a great
the timing
marketing
was,
strategy.
I felt so badly. I was like, oh, because there was this brief time where I was like, this is going to be great. People are going to want to know about Survivors Club, and they're going to be excited about, this story. And then I was like, not while they're stuck in their homes.
No, nobody wants to read about that.
So maybe we are far enough away. And also, when folks get to Ashfall, it's such a fantastic book, but it is very, very different from what we have all experienced. Like, it's not, hey, with a lockdown, you can prevent an outbreak of tentacled monsters. Like, this is not the same. So I hope folks will go, okay, this is fun and distinct enough that it is not, bringing back my own personal trauma of being, being on lockdown, but it's really, really fun. So, and maybe something like the resurgence of Last of Us will help folks go, oh yeah, I can see a story like that and not feel like it's, my personal story. But yeah, folks should absolutely check it out, because Ashfall is a kick. And I'm so excited to hear that the 3rd one is nearly done, because at the end of Ashfall, I am ready to grab that next one. So
I know I saw somebody's review. I think it was somebody had posted on Goodreads that said, I hope we don't have to wait another 4 or 5 years for the next book. And I'm like,
yeah, no pressure.
So I think what I will say about post-apocalyptic books is my mom, her review was, why don't you write happy things? And I was like, well, I'm not a happy person. So also happy things are rarely interesting.
Yes.
Like, this is one of those Anna Karenina kind of things where all the happy families are the same. And it's not very exciting or interesting to write about. You're like, oh, and then nothing happened and I had no worries and life was great.
Well, there's a real legitimate argument to be made that because we need to write dramatic stories, we focus on, the horrors of life. And then because that becomes our entertainment, we believe life should be more dramatic. Like we downplay peaceful boringness as a virtue in our art, right? Because it's not interesting. And I wonder what effect that has on us as people, where we're going, if somebody says, how's it going? And I'm like, I'm doing, nothing's been happening. That sounds like a bad thing, because all of our stories say life must be dramatic and, and miserable. And it's like, no, sometimes not much going on would be really nice.
What I think about
we don't tell stories about it.
Is I think about sort of when people have a little bit more bandwidth, and during the lockdowns, everybody was playing Animal Crossing, everybody was watching Great British Bake Off. They're like, I want something that's cozy and low stakes. Like, that is all I can handle right now. And as we have moved on from that level of the pandemic and gotten sort of a little bit back to our normal level of life, I think you're right. I think people are more interested in, okay, I'm ready for a little mental challenge now. I'm ready to get back out there and in a place where, there are higher stakes. But it always reminds me of my grandparents talking about the entertainment during World War II. And they were talking about how they would go to the movies, and they're like, everything was so grim and difficult, and you were rationing, and you had family members that were overseas, and you had all of these issues that were going on, and we're like, we just wanted light, fluffy everybody was dancing around, these wonderful movies where it's just so much saccharine and fluff, and you would go to the movies and come out with a case of diabetes because it was just so sweet.
And lots of synchronized swimming. Like,
Yeah,
like it was just, here's pretty people in pools. That's it. Like, that's all people needed.
No stress, just go bake some banana bread, you're gonna be fine.
Yeah. And I think there is merit to that, and like and accepting it in ourselves. Like, maybe this is what I need, and that's okay. And then when you're ready, you can handle the challenging stuff. But I also think the impulse to say what is going to grab, what is going to be grabby, pushes us as artists to, lean towards something that is more dramatic than is necessary. I find this in myself, where I'm like, why is it that I keep pushing my stories to higher stakes? Because everybody's, all the advice we've ever received about writing is, raise the stakes, raise the stakes, raise the stakes. And then I'm going, what is that? What is the impulse? What is the impact of that on a culture? Where all the artists are saying, I need to have the highest possible stakes, and we end up with every movie we're seeing, a city is destroyed by a supervillain.
Yeah,
that's not good for us psychologically.
I will give a shout out to the person that I consider to be the godmother of all writing in Eugene, Oregon. She helps to run a nonprofit called Word Crafters.
Oh, I've heard the group. Yes.
Yeah, and she did a class on plotting a novel, which was completely lost on me because I'm not a plotter, but the class was really good and I think could have been useful to other writers who weren't me. And one of the things that she talked about was different levels of stakes, and she was talking about sort of stakes as seen through the point of view of how many people do you care about. And then upping the stakes would just be moving up different levels. And I'm just going to really summarize what I can remember of this class, which was probably about 6 or 8 years ago. But if you're at -1, it means you don't even care about yourself. And so to up the stakes, the journey through the story would be for you to learn to care about yourself. So somebody who's, maybe very depressed or suicidal or whatever the case is, to rediscover that their life is worth living. And then somebody who is already at that point where they care about themselves, now they have to learn to care about somebody else. So, then they adopt a puppy or something like that. And so then once they can care about one other person, then they can care about a wider community and so forth and so on. So for me, one of the things that she said that was really interesting was she said, you can't just jump from level -1 to level 5, which is, the entire universe.
Yeah.
You have to go up gradually. And so if you're planning your book series out, that by the end of it, they're going to be saving the entire universe, and they're at the beginning, they're starting out not even caring, then the stakes have to go up incrementally. They can't just jump from one level to the other. And I think that was such a good way of thinking about how to raise stakes incrementally in a realistic way that readers could kind of be on board with each thing, and they could see how the character was concerned about a bigger and bigger sphere outside of just themselves.
Yeah. Well, and I think that is very useful for us when we're thinking about, how to raise stakes throughout a story. But I do wonder about how do we lower stakes in a story in a way that is satisfying and that says to readers, lowering the stakes in your life is okay, that you don't need to be saving the world tomorrow, and at the same time not looking away. I mean, this is a tension that we all face on a day-to-day basis. Am I doing enough to fight the rise of fascism in my country? And at the same time, how do I stay sane? How do we lower stakes? And because
it always feels, no matter what you are doing, that the answer to am I doing enough to fight fascism, it always feels like the answer has to be no.
Right.
Because
it
always feels like you could be doing more.
Right.
However, you are one person.
Yeah.
You cannot single-handedly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if the media I'm consuming says, well, the only way is to, be a superhero, is that unhealthy? We don't see the people who are doing the little things, and because that doesn't make for a compelling story. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm excited to see like Oppenheimer and see characters who have a small role, and
well, we're all excited to see Oppenheimer because of Cillian Murphy. So obviously one of our homeboys here in Ireland.
Did you see his interview about Barbie? It's just a little clip, totally great. He's just delightful. Like he's this person where he can play the scariest villain, but in person, totally nice guy. And he does this this little interview where he's going, "Yeah, I think it's wonderful that everybody's excited about Barbie. I'm going to go see Barbie when it first comes out. Like everybody wants to go to the theater more." And you're like, "He's nice. I like him." You know,
Oh,
he's seems like a very nice guy. And then I watch Peaky Blinders, and I'm like, and he's also terrifying.
yeah.
If folks have not seen Peaky Blinders, worth your time. He's remarkable in it too. My son got me into that one. My, now 19-year-old son, he was maybe 16, 17. He was like, "Dad, you got to watch Peaky Blinders." And then I was watching it and I was going, my 16-year-old recommended this to me, but it's really good.
And it's also, and then you as a parent, you're like, but he's learning history, so it's kind of okay.
I'll just I'll convince myself that it's fine that he's watching people like slash one another with razor blades.
It's educational,
right? Yeah. He's learning about the world, certainly. So, what about announcements? What's something that you are wanting readers to know about right now?
Oh, let's see. Well, you had asked earlier about news, what's in the news that's caught my attention. And I used to live in Vermont, and some of our listeners will know or remember that there's big flooding that is happening in Vermont. State of emergency has been declared, that whole thing. It's supposed to be 1,000-year flood, but they had a flood similar to that about 10 years ago. So I'm not a mathematician, but if you have 2,000-year floods 10 years apart, that's not 1,000-year flood.
Yep. This is going to be normal.
Yeah. So I think the climate crisis, and I know some people don't think it's a thing, but if we continue doing not much, our kids and definitely our grandkids are going to really suffer.
Yeah.
And, honestly, we're already suffering. We've got record-breaking heat waves. We've got a heat dome in Texas. We've got the floods in Vermont. I know even in Europe, not so much in Ireland. So the prediction for Ireland is that eventually it will become like Spain, which the Irish are really happy about because they're like, well, then I won't have to fly to Spain for my vacation anymore.
Yeah. Although it will be more extreme weather. So it'll be more often like Spain, but also with heat waves that kill your crops,
waves that kill your crops,
and
there's
that are much colder than you're used to.
There's a blue-green algae bloom that's happening,
yes.
And those are dangerous. And I know that there's been a lot of warming off of the coast of Florida, which just almost anytime you say something about Florida, you're just like, oh, what now?
I was just talking to my brother yesterday about why are people buying multi-million-dollar condos in Miami. They will be underwater. Like it will not be a livable city in 100 years. And yet people don't make financial decisions thinking, I'm going to buy this condo and I have to deal with the consequences of the fact that, more and more often it will flood. Well, eventually it will be underwater. Like it will not, and that is, we are at the point where that is inevitable. You are buying a multi-million-dollar condo that no one will be able to live in within 100 years. And yet, like, that's too far off. One of the things that I think about when I think about this is, we've got what seem like two competing concerns. So we're talking about things like, the Supreme Court cases and this kind of rise of fascism, and then the global climate crisis. And it seems like they're unrelated. And one of them is far off and one of them is more pressing. This is the immediate and we need to confront this. But the more I'm reading about it, the more I'm learning about the ways that they are, intimately connected. So a lot of the rise of the far right in continental Europe came about because of droughts in Syria that led to, destabilization, that led to a wave of migration, that then led to a lot of folks in Central Eastern Europe saying no more migrants. We don't want to deal with cultural change of people moving into our communities. Therefore, we'll embrace the far right. And we're going to have a lot more climate refugees. And the ways that we prepare our society to either be welcoming or exclusive that seem like they are immediate political concerns rather than climate concerns are climate concerns. Like, people will have to move. And what kind of society are we going to be that says, welcome, we made your home in Ecuador unlivable. You are welcome here,
well,
or
and this is the thing, is the sort of the great inequality of it is the nations that are, responsible for the majority of pollution, also tend to be more developed, economically richer nations. And so because we have more resources, we're going to be able to insulate ourselves more from climate change. Not totally, but we'll be comfortable for longer before we all fry. And then places where, people have not contributed as much to climate change, they are also not going to have the economic resources to deal with the climate change that is happening to them, through little or no fault of their own.
Yeah, and no fault. I mean, in some cases, islands in the South Pacific that contributed not at all to climate change will be underwater. And those people will have to move to places that are already saying, we don't accept you. Australia saying to, refugees from, some of those islands, you can't come here. They need a place to go, and they need a welcoming place that is going to take ownership.
And this is how we get Waterworld. So
yeah, those, the fascism of Waterworld is the fascism we are confronting today. Like, how do we change our culture to be welcoming and fight against the folks who are saying build a wall, because build a wall is going to be even more relevant in 100 years.
The other movie that I was thinking about, which deals sort of with fascism and global climate issues, is Children of Man.
Oh my gosh, I love that movie so much. That's on my top 10. If folks have not seen Children of Men, it is a brilliantly made film. Just technically, there is a scene where it's a single shot that's like 20 minutes long, which is really hard to do, and so just watch that movie, Children of Men. A brilliant movie, but it will make you think. It's what is it all worth if we're not taking care of our children? They really are the point. If it's not for our kids, everything falls apart, and you really see that in this really visceral way. So check out Children of Men. It's brilliant. I'm gonna make sure to add a link to it in the show notes as well.
I will make a final linguistic related comment, because I'm gonna just turn every segment in this podcast into something about language. So one of the things that I can't remember which of my teachers or which class we were talking about. We were talking about languages that don't have tenses. So English has, a past tense and a present tense, but English does not have a future tense grammatically. We make one by changing our wording. So we theoretically have one, but we don't grammatically have a future tense in English. And the sociolinguistics, they had done sort of this study looking at how much money did people save. And they found that languages that do not have a grammatical future tense saved less than languages like Chinese, like Mandarin Chinese, which do have a grammatical future tense, which the idea is, the future is a concrete part of your thinking, rather than the future is sort of this muddly idea that your brain. So, I love the Sapir Whorf theory, the idea, and to, just summarize it horribly again in the tiny little bit, is the idea that the language that you have influences the way that you think. So if you don't have the words to articulate something, it is not impossible, but it is much harder to have that concept.
Yeah. I know there are concepts like in Spanish, existence has two different verbs. And so you can think about the permanent condition of something existing or the temporary state. And that allows that everybody who is speaking Spanish is on a continual basis thinking to themselves, is this thing temporary, or is this a permanent condition of? And it changes the way you think about things. And we just don't have that.
So Irish has the same. So there's two, like if you say there are two ways to say there is something. You can say is, like there is, or you can say ta. And again, one is sort of like, this is, it is a nice day just right now. Like the weather right now is nice. Or all of the weather for all time has always been nice. It's that sort of habitual versus temporary condition. The other thing, okay, my final thing that I love about Irish, not the final thing, but one of the final things I'll say in this podcast that I love about Irish is the way that they talk about emotion. And this has been, for me as a parent, is so helpful in talking about emotions with my kiddo, because what they'll say in Irish literally means, I have this emotion on me. Like, there is this emotion on me. So if you say so in English, if you are sad, you say, I am sad, which means like you are personifying sadness. Like you yourself have taken on the idea of sadness or anger or any other emotion. You've identified yourself as that emotion. Whereas in Irish, they'll say, I have sadness on me. So the emotion is separate from you. The emotion is just residing in the universe, and then it comes down and settles on you for a little while, and then it can leave.
And it's probably far more comfortable to then share. Hey, I need you to know that sadness has settled on me. But I don't have to that doesn't become my identity. This is something I need to convey to you because I'm wearing this right now. And that is really cool. I like that a lot.
Sadness. I love it.
Well, and I think we can bring that into English. I mean, that's the kind. I'll bet you find Irish writers writing in English will be more inclined to say, a deep sadness settled upon her, and it's like, yeah, because they were thinking in that way, and that is healthier. I'll bet it makes people more inclined to share how they're feeling. That would be interesting to talk with a therapist in Ireland. Do they find people actually are, or are they,
I don't know. So my spouse and I have a theory that being Irish, they tend to be seem like a very cheery and optimistic sort of people. And my theory is that if you were not of a cheery and optimistic disposition, your genes would not have survived the history of Ireland to this point. So the selection process for Irish people has been you must be of a cheery disposition.
Yeah, that's grim and probably very true. The people who were, the most sour were like, nope, I cannot handle this, or they left. I mean, that's the other thing is the people who
well, that's my own family. They left during the Great Famine and went to the U.S. and so it's very interesting sort of making the trip.
Is people who left Ireland during the famine, and then another quarter is people who left continental Europe because they were Jewish and were afraid of what was coming. And so I'm a composition of people who went, we're getting the hell out. Which now I think about as much as I have envied you moving to Ireland, I'm like, I am feeling that in my genetics. Like I need to get out. Like, I think there's a part of some of us that goes, this is the wiser, healthier response is this is not a safe place. This is what I do when it's not a safe place. We get out,
Yeah.
And also, and where you're living looks gorgeous. So that's
it's really hard to argue with it.
Yeah, it's really great. But I'm gonna steal that. I like that a lot. That this feeling is upon me. So one of the other things we do each week, we have a weekly poll that we put up on Twitter and now Threads and all the various places that the company has an account. So what would be your poll that you would want to ask the public for them to weigh in on?
All right, public. What I need your help with is deciding steampunk or dystopia.
Oh, that will be interesting. Yes. And that would be interesting. Maybe we should run that poll every few years because I think it changes. I think these go through waves. But yes, as of right now, where are folks at? Steampunk or dystopia? So when you're hearing this show, hop over to our page and cast your vote for that one. And what's a book that's in your to-read pile? What are you looking forward to checking out when you finish the Inheritance trilogy and the Greenbone saga?
Yeah, no, I'm a very promiscuous reader. I am not loyal to any book series, but I'm also very determined. So once I start a series, I will finish it. It just sometimes I will get distracted. So the thing that I'm looking forward to reading is Babel by R.F. I'm probably going
Kuang.
to not
I think
say
it's Kuang.
Kuang. Yeah.
I
I've never actually heard the author's last name said out loud, and I feel
Yeah, no,
bad
I don't
about
know.
not
I very well could be
mispronouncing it.
wrong, but yeah, I think it's Kuang, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I have. But you're not the first person who's recommended that to me, so I'm gonna have to check that out as well. It's fantasy, right?
Yeah.
It's a fantasy
Um,
series or fantasy book
yeah,
novel.
so it's a fantasy series. It's actually about magic and linguistics, to no one's surprise.
Yeah, yeah, it checks
But
all the Molly boxes. Yes.
I loved her series. It starts out with Poppy War. And it's sort of about Harry Potter. It's sort of that military academy kind of, we go through this school and training process and then eventually become soldiers and get involved in this war, and a lot of really interesting fight scenes and magic systems and having to do with gods and deities and spirits and all of this, and it's such a fantastic series. So I love her as a writer. And then when she came out with a book where it's like linguistics and magic, I was like, so you just wrote this for me then?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
just
yeah, exactly. I will. Yeah, I would love that. I will have to check that out. Speaking of linguistics, this is not a book recommendation, but if you want to check out a linguistics podcast that is always excellent and really fun, The Illusionist with an A, not illusion,
Yes,
Illusionist.
yep.
Have you listened? It's so great. So yes, The Illusionist is one that I highly, highly, highly recommend. I got to see her live. She came to Portland and did a show. Very funny
I'm
about,
so jealous.
yeah, and it was about the way Ms., Miss, and Mrs. have changed over time, and then
Hmm.
MX, and it was really cool, and she manages to make it very funny. So yes, people check out The Illusionist. It's really cool. So where can listeners find you so that they can find out about your writing and where to find the next book?
So most of my information is up on my website, which is mkmartinwriter.com. And if you're on Facebook, you can find me at MK Martin Writer. And if you're on Mastodon, I'm on Writing Exchange at MK Martin. If you're on Twitter, MK Martin Writer. So I've tried to make it as easy as possible.
Consistent, yes. And so I
Yep.
will, and I'll link to all those in the show notes. So anybody who's listening right now or you're watching on YouTube, it's in the show notes. But yes, absolutely follow Molly so that you're ready for book 3 when that drops. Okay, so I should thank some folks before we have our send off. Thanks to artist Max Oakland, who reached out and provided one of his songs for our intro, I Prefer the Dusk. Let Max know you like it by following him on Twitter at Max Oakland with 3 Ds. And thanks to Halizna CCO for their song Kids for the ad break. If you're in a band and you'd like your song used on the show, I would love to highlight a listener's work like Max's song, so email that to me. Thanks. Excuse me. Thanks to, sorry, Doug. Right then I cough, which is something else you have to edit out. Thanks to Doug, the producer, for making the show sound good and taking the blame when it doesn't. I cannot forget to mention Writers Not Writing is a production of Not a Pipe Publishing, so please go to notapipepublishing.com and check out the amazing books written by writers who didn't procrastinate too much. If you like this show, rate and review it wherever you found it, and please check out Molly's The Survivors Club Chronicles. It starts with Survivors Club and then continues in Ashfall. Tell a friend about it. That always is very helpful. Give that book that 5th click, click on that 5th star. That makes a big difference. And then write a short review. If you've got 3 minutes, you will make Molly's day. So please do that. And if you like this show, click on that little thumbs up. That would help us as well. So Molly and I have 3 things we want you to remember for this next week. Molly, what's your first piece of advice for everybody?
So what I would like is for you to use your powers to protect the vulnerable, use your voice to uplift those who've been silenced, and shop locally where possible.
Shop local. I agree with all of those. And I would say, remember this next week that a book without spaces would be gibberish, and our lives need spaces too. So don't ignore the spaces. And third, no matter how much you procrastinate, we're still proud of you.
Yay!
My time.